Mr. President, this is an amendment that 19 million American families, in which 19 million American families will be interested, because it's an amendment to reduce the cost of student loans, which 19 million Americans have. This is the season of the year when a great many students have been admitted to a college or a community college, or making their plans, and they're looking for where they're going to get their money. And what this amendment will do is reduce the interest rate on 19 million student loans from 6.8% to 5.3%, or on the average loan of about $25,000 a year, it would save that student $1,700 or $1,800 over that period of time. More specifically, it would not only help the student, but it would prevent the federal government from overcharging 19 million American college students on their student loans to help pay for the health care bill and other government programs. Now, one may ask, well, wait a minute, I thought we were debating the health care bill. How did we get to student loans? That's a very good question, because it just came up over the weekend. Of course, we talked about student loans. There have been proposals, but there's no hearing in the Senate, no consideration in the Senate committee, which I'm a member. But over the weekend, the Democratic majority decided, well, look, while we're at it, let's have another Washington takeover. Let's take over the federal student loan program. And let's take a program which is working very well, in which 15 million American students have voted with their feet to say we would prefer to get a regular private loan backed by the government, which we get at our college campuses through our community bank, through a nonprofit institution. Even though we do have an option for a government loan, 3 out of 4 private students have said we prefer the student loan through the private lender. Yet, over the weekend, the Democratic majority has said, while we're at it, let's take over the federal student loan program, which means that starting July 1, students have no choice. You go to the federal government to get your student loan, all 19 million of you, which is a new experience for 15 of the 19 million. And the way you're going to do it, and this is all going to be set up in a short period of time, is you're going to go to 4 federal call centers and the internet. So instead of going to your local lender or to your nonprofit institution, who can help you with the application form and help you see what your options are and encourage you as you make your plans for college, welcome to the new government loan program. You have no choice. That's what you're going to do. What are the other aspects of this? Well, one is, other than denying choice to 19 million students on more than 2,000 campuses who prefer the federal loan program, the federal government's going to have to borrow another $500 billion in order to make these loans. Now, let's think about this for a moment. What is the number one issue that most Americans worry about today? It's that we have too much debt. And so what did this weekend takeover do? It adds about $500 billion to the federal debt in order to make student loans at the rate of about $90 or $100 billion a year for 4 or 5 years. So we take away choice, we add to the debt, we also, 31,000 people are out of their jobs. These are a lot of loans. And so we have a lot of people in these organizations like Ed South in my state, a nonprofit organization that helps students get their loans. So all of these lenders are out of business, and we have one big bank, the federal government. The education secretary is the new banker of the year. He's a very good education secretary. I don't know how good a banker he's going to be. So we lose 31,000 jobs. But here's the rub, and here's what my amendment is about. The federal government is going to be borrowing money at 2.8% and loaning it to students at 6.8%. And they're going to take the difference and spend it on new government programs, including the health care bill. So we're going to be overcharging 19 million students to help pay for the health care bill. According to the most recent Congressional Budget Office estimates, it's about $8.7 billion of the overcharged money is going to go to pay for the health care bill. Now, my friends on the other side have gotten up. They've already spent the money, of course. They've announced to everybody, well, we're going to spend it on this, we're going to spend it on that, we're going to spend it on this. But what they don't tell you is where they get the money. And where they get the money is overcharging students. Overcharging students. Now, these aren't Wall Street financiers we're overcharging. You know, this might be a single mom going to a community college in Tennessee who has a job, who wants a better job, and she borrows some money to go to the community college, and the federal government overcharges her to pay for some government program. She might not like that. In fact, I think there will be about 19 million student loan holders across the country who go to school next year and say, wait a minute here. You mean you're overcharging me on my student loan to pay for this health care bill and to pay for other government programs? And the answer will be, yes, that's what we're doing, unless you vote for this amendment. Now, the estimate by our friends on the other side is that their federal takeover of the student loan enterprise will save $61 billion. If they're correct, let's give it to the students. Let's reduce their interest rate. $1,700 or $1,800 per student in interest over 10 years, which is the amount of savings, is a lot of money. May not seem like a lot of money to congressmen and senators in Washington, but to the single mom going to the community college who borrows money to go to school to get a better job, $1,700 or $1,800 is a lot of money. And in addition to the higher premiums, the higher taxes, the Medicare cuts, the new costs to states, we're going to be overcharging on student loans. Let me use a specific example from Tennessee, if I may. I was at the University of Tennessee earlier this week. This is a university of which I used to be president. University of Tennessee has 30,000 students. 37% of them, or 11,251, have federal private loans today. The average student debt's about $20,000. After July 1, all 11,000 students at the University of Tennessee with these federal private loans are going to have to switch to the government loans. And the government's going to overcharge 11,000 students who go to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville and use that overcharged money to pay for new government programs, including the health care bill. They're going to do the same thing to the University of Tennessee at Martin. There they choose to use the private loan program. They like it better than the government loan program. They think it's more convenient for the students. They've chosen it. 3,600 students at UT Martin have federal private loans. They're going to be out of those loans by July the 1st. They're going to have government loans, and the government's going to overcharge them to help pay for the health care program. Maryville College, I'll be there Saturday night to help dedicate their arts center. 824 students have federal loans today. They're going to have government loans. They're going to switch from private loans to government loans. They'll have no choice after July 1. I know a lot of these students. They come from modest families in most cases. They're not going to be very happy to learn that when they switch to a government loan after July 1, and if they have an average size loan, which is about $25,000, that over 10 years they're going to pay $1,700 or $1,800 to help pay for the health care program or other new government programs. At Carson-Newman College, it's 1,259 students. At East Tennessee State University, it's 8,187 students. In all of Tennessee, it's 200,000 students who have student loans, who are going to be overcharged an average of $1,700 or $1,800 a year to help pay for the health care program or some other government program. And this amendment would say, no, we're not. If we're going to take over the student loan program, at least we're not going to overcharge the students and use it for the health care program. We're going to give the money back to the students. So the point of my amendment is very simple. We're going to reduce the interest rate we charge on 19 million student loans from 6.8 to 5.3% and let the students have the saving instead of letting the government have the savings. That's what the other side hasn't told people about the student loans. Now, if we'd had an ample opportunity to debate this in the Senate, if we'd had a committee hearing on it, if we'd taken it through the regular process, maybe we could have pointed this out. But no, we do it over the weekend. Put it in the House bill, send it over here, jam it through with great breast beating and protestations. Look what we've done for the country. I'm accustomed to that, Mr. President. I used to be a governor. I remember lots of members of Congress who would say, I've done a great thing in Washington, and then they'd send the bill to me to pay. And then the governor, in this case, the health care bill will do the same thing. It will send to the governors and to the states new costs. Our governor estimates it's $1.1 billion over 5 years to $1.5 billion. That's about $300 million a year. New costs that state taxpayers will have to pay. And as the Medicaid cost goes up, we'll get the second blow to the students of Tennessee, because either the state is going to have to reduce funding for public higher education, which I believe this health care bill will help permanently damage, or they're going to have to raise taxes, or they're going to have to raise tuition, or they're going to have to do all three. So if I'm a student at Maryville College, Carson Newman, or the University of Tennessee First, this health care bill is going to overcharge me on my student loan to help pay for it. Second, it's going to send such big new costs to the government that the governor is going to have to reduce funding to my college or university, and my tuition is going to go up. All those students in California who are protesting about a 34% increase in tuition, they probably don't realize why that's happening. The main reason for that is because over the years, the federal government has so regulated the Medicaid program that the states pay about a third of, that the state budgets have grown and grown and grown, and the governors, such as Governor Schwarzenegger in California, have had no choice except to cut other programs. And governors know that when you get down through the budget process in the state, it usually comes down to Medicaid or higher education. And so a great university like the University of California is on its knees, and to even hope to keep its quality, it raises tuition 34%. Now, my amendment won't help that problem. The law that the president signed yesterday already will transfer to states these huge new costs. They're going to permanently damage higher education and raise tuition. But what my amendment will do is say we are not going to, in addition to causing a raise in tuition, overcharge 200,000 students in Tennessee for their student loans and use $8.7 billion of it to help pay for health care. Sometimes I think, Mr. President, that the motto of the Obama administration is, if you can find it in the yellow pages, the government ought to be doing it. I mean, this is really breathtaking. While we're taking over cars, banks, insurance companies, while we're taking over more of health care, we'll just also take over the student loan program. Add $500 billion to the federal debt, overcharge 19 million students, cause 31,000 people to lose their jobs, and say all in a day's work. That's what happened last weekend, just over the weekend. That's the decision that they did, and then over here bragging about how much they're going to do for everybody. Well, we're going to do a little more for everybody if we have a chance to vote on this amendment, because you can go home and say, either I voted to cut your interest rate on your student loan from 6.8 to 5.3% and give you the savings, or I voted to overcharge you $1,700 or $1,800 a year and give the money to the government so it can help pay for the health care bill. Mr. President, I would like to include in the record at this point, or following my remarks, a few communications that I've received from Tennessee. Here's a letter from Vanderbilt University to Congressman Cooper from the Chancellor, which says, our overarching concern with this proposal is it forces institutions, including Vanderbilt, to switch to direct lending. Now, here's a distinguished university, one of the top research universities in the world. They have chosen, they believe it's best for their students and for their campus to have the private loans. And, well, we know better, of course, than Vanderbilt University what's best for the campus and best for the students. So we say, no, July 1, only the government. Vanderbilt opposes the elimination of the FFEL program. We encourage Congress to carefully study the many alternate proposals. In addition to our concerns about the elimination of choice, competition, and the high level of services, products, and debt management we believe would come with this switch, we're very concerned that the proposed time frame is unreasonable. And so Vanderbilt opposes that. So does the Baptist College of Health Sciences. So does Maryville College. So does the Middle Tennessee School of Anesthesia. So does Dyersburg State Community College. So I ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, to include in the record these remarks and an article I wrote in the Washington Post that was published on Sunday, March 7, about the student loan takeover.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I have a little history with the student loan program. I see the distinguished senator from Utah is here. When he was the ranking Republican on the Senate Health and Education Committee 20 years ago, I was the United States Education Secretary, and He even helped me in my confirmation process, which I've always been deeply grateful for. But he and I worked together during that time when the question of having a government loan program or a direct loan program came up. And it was widely discussed. We had a Republican president then and a Democratic Congress. And we came to a compromise. And the compromise was to say, let's have both. We'll give students the option and help them stay on and keep the organizations on their toes. So if you're a student at the University of Tennessee, University of Utah, you've got a choice. You can either say, I don't want to fool with all these private lenders or the local bank or the nonprofit organization in my state, Ed South, or others, or the state organization. I want to go straight to the government. So all students have that. That's 19 million students, and only 1/4 of them choose that. Now, in the United States of America, where choice and competition is an important part of our culture, that usually teaches us a lesson. That would suggest to us that most campuses, most students, by overwhelming majorities, prefer being in the private market to just lining up to go to the government. Otherwise, we'd have the government grocery store, we'd have the government car company. Actually, we're beginning to sound like that in this country. We'd have the government insurance company, and all banks would be government banks. Everything would be in the government. We used to have a system like that in the Soviet Union. Ours did a little better over time, and generally our motto has been, if you can find it in the yellow pages, the government shouldn't be doing it. What's happening with this administration and this Congress is the reverse. If you can find it in the yellow pages, the government should be doing it. Here's the situation that developed over the last 20 years. There are roughly 6,000 institutions of higher education in this country. Many people say, well, all higher education is like the University of Tennessee or Harvard or California. But there are many kinds of colleges and universities: for-profit, nonprofit, private, public, historically black colleges, many different kinds of institutions. And the genius of our system is that we let federal dollars, either through Pell Grants or through loans, follow the student to the institution of their choice. Choice and competition in our system of higher education has given us by far the best system of higher education in the world. So of those 6,000 institutions, last year, 2008, 4,421 schools chose to use the regular student loan program. That's 3 out of 4. About 1 out of 4 used the government loan, the direct loan program, the one that everybody's going to be made to use now. Currently, there are just under 2,000 lenders who participate in the student loan program. They're banks, they're nonprofit institutions like Ed South in Tennessee. In last year, nearly $100 billion in student loans were made. So let's keep in mind, as the government takes this over, we go from a system where we have government-backed loans, which cost the taxpayers very little, to government loans at the rate of $100 billion a year, which means we're going to have to run up $500 billion more in debt at a time when our debt is ridiculously out of control. That's this weekend Washington takeover that just occurred. There's not definitive evidence to suggest that the federal government can make these loans better than lenders can make these loans. I don't think the Department of Education has the manpower to do it. I think that by July 1, there's going to be consternation all over the country from families who have applied for student loans and are applying through their federal call center or through the internet. Ed South, a nonprofit provider in Tennessee, for example, has 5 regional outreach counselors who canvass Tennessee and provide career training. They made 443 presentations at Tennessee schools to help students understand. Remember, we have 200,000 of these students in Tennessee to help them understand their options. They worked with 12,000 students to help them understand what they could do. They worked with 1,000 school counselors. Will the U.S. Department of Education soon be providing all of these services? So Senator Gregg earlier had written the Congressional Budget Office asking how much money this federal takeover would save. They came back with an explanation that it's not 67 or 61 billion, which is the current number being used today, but more like 47 billion. My own suspicion, and I can't prove it, but my own suspicion, having been a university president having been Secretary of Education and having watched this program for 20 years, is that in the real world, the federal government is not going to make these 19 million loans more convenient for students. It's not going to be able to do it any cheaper. It's just going to deny people choice, run up the debt, throw 31,000 people out of jobs, and the icing on the cake, and it is a sour-tasting icing, is that the 19 million students who have student loans after July 1 are going to be overcharged by the federal government, who will be borrowing money at 2.8%, loaning it at 6.8%, and using the money to help pay for the health care bill and other programs. Now, our friends on the other side they'll be saying they like to blame everything on the bankers or the lenders. Why the lenders are charging too much money. Well, if they're charging too much money, reduce what they get. Reduce what they get. You're saying there's a $61 billion savings, much of which comes from the fact that the federal government can borrow money more cheaply than private lenders can. But then you're saying we're going to take the savings and we're going to spend it. We're going to overcharge these students. I can't believe the brazenness of this. And neither will I believe 19 million students understand it. So, Mr. President, I'm glad to come here today and talk about my amendment, which I'll be glad to introduce at the appropriate time. No Senate bill has been introduced. Our committee has held no hearings. We've not had a markup of this bill. This is just a wondrous Washington takeover over the weekend. We stick into the health care bill another Washington takeover, this time of 19 million student loans, and on top of it, congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Working Student. You're going to get to be overcharged on your loan to help pay for the health care bill and other government programs. So I hope my friends in the Senate on both sides of the aisle will see the injustice of this and say, okay, you're right, Senator Alexander, if we're going to take it over, and if we're going to create $61 billion in savings, at least let's give the students the savings. Let's not give it to the government. Let's not overcharge the students on an average $25,000 loan, $1,700 or $1,800 over 10 years. I think we need it. If we do, we need a truth in lending stamp that goes on every single student loan starting July 1 that says, warning, your government is overcharging you in order to help pay for other government programs. And we'll let the single mom who's got a job, who's going to school to help improve her circumstance, let's see what she thinks about the idea of her being overcharged to help pay for other government programs. So my amendment, when it's voted on, will do a very simple thing. It will say to the 19 million students in the country, we're going to reduce your interest rate on your student loan from a typical 6.8% to 5.3%. That's going to save you $1,700 or $1,800 on an average loan. And it says, Mr. President, we're not going to overcharge 19 million students to help pay for the health care bill.